Hi, welcome back to my channel. It's Kim. Today is part 2 of the Craft With Me Vintage Lot Book project. If you watched part 1, you know how to make this book. And if you're crafting along with me, there are some things that I do before I go into the embellishment stage. That's like stage, step 3. So we're on step 2 right now, and what I have handy to work with is my glue gun and glue sticks, a good pair of scissors that can cut, laces and things like that, like your fabric scissors. I also have my Fabri-Tac, and I have my large quantity pieces of laces, kind of like, here's an example. In I use my ecru, beige, taupe, white family, but I pulled out all the pieces that I have, generous sized pieces of, because these are going to be covering our pages, kind of like a base. So what you need to decide is kind of like your color scheme. You just heard mine. It's the white, cream, ecru, taupey kind of thing, and especially, if you're going to use tea dye stuff, it's nice to add like the ecru and the taupe, because it looks nice in there too. So I am going to start with my first page, my covers, my front and back covers, and show you what I do. So I am just going to cut a piece that will fit across this, but I'm going to make sure that I leave enough of a piece at the top, because we're going to fold it over to hide this unfinished edge. You can choose not to do that option if you want. You can glue lace along the top so you have ruffles on the top if you want. This project is one that is completely adaptable to what you like. So I am going to pick out my cover, and because my book is kind of, in the ivory, I think I'm going to put some white lace over this. The other thing to keep in mind is it is really pretty if you have an edge that is scalloped or, dangles down, because the dangles look really, really pretty along the bottom here, hanging down the bottom of your book. So this white lace that I picked, if you can see down here, it's got a little bit of a scallop. I just have to trim this net off, which I'll do after I get the, glued down on the book. So I'm going to explain while I'm doing that. First I'm going to see, and I don't think I'm going to have enough. This isn't quite high enough to go over the top of my page, so we're going to pick a different one. That's a good thing to check. So we're going to pick a different one, and let's see if I have enough, if this one's wide enough. Okay, so I'm going to switch. Maybe not. Let's see. The other thing you need to pay attention to is the pattern. You can see this one, the pattern goes up and down. So I would have to do 2 separate pieces, or I would have to have, kind of don't want your flowers sideways like that. So I'm going to use 2 separate pieces, because I think this is the one that I want to use. And I'm actually going to glue it before I cut it, which your style is completely up to you. Again, I'm going to leave a little bit, maybe that much at the top, so we can fold it over, and trust me, you're not going to see it. I am going to do a quick snip along the bottom though, and I'll trim this up more precisely once I get it glued down, just so I have a good space to work in. Okay, so depending on the lace that I'm going to use is what glue that I use. I like to use hot glue unless it's something like this. This is such a translucent lace that you don't want big globs of hot glue showing through. So if it's what I call a fufu-shishi lace, then I would use my Fabri-Tac. So that's why I've got the 2 glues out. I use them, interchangeably depending on what lace I'm gluing. This one is okay with the hot glue, so I'm just going to put a generous line along the top here, And then something that I like to do when I'm hot gluing is I do the initial touch just to make sure it glues on. And you might want to use your what do you call these things? You might want to use these, your, what are they called? Your finger protectors. These are from the Dollar Tree. Or you can use your little Betty Crocker red spatula to press all the glue down. But then what I do after is, before it gets too dry, I go back like this and I get off like some extra. You end up getting it all over your fingers, but it's a better way to make sure you don't have a ton of lace and big globs that are going to see through. It just makes it look a little nicer, I think. Okay, so we're going to do this same thing. I do not glue in the center of my page. I know that I'm going to be putting enough embellishments on here that I really don't need it. So I just try to get a really good seal on the glue all the way around. And then I know, sorry for that, my glue gun is on an old saucer and it makes that noise. I apologize. I'm heavy-handed sometimes. Okay, so I'm gonna, again, just kind of rub off some of that extra glue. You can see it on my table here as it kind of comes off. So I'm going to peel back now. Ooh, new glue stick. If you choose not to use hot glue and you prefer to use Fabri-Tac, you can do what I'm doing, which is like a straight line, or you can just do little dots all the way around. And then I just kind of fold this back real carefully to make sure I don't get wrinkles or bubbles. If you do, it's okay. Just smooth it out as you're pressing down. I just did that on the bottom here. Brushing off my glue. It's a technical term, I guess. The glue brushing. Okay, so this is what I'm looking for. And I am going to trim this. And here's a tip. When I trim it like this, this piece that I'm cutting off, this is going to go, I have a bin for snippets and clusters. So when I want to make snippets and clusters, you know, I've got a piece like this. I would never get rid of this. This goes in my cluster bin. You know how us crafters are with our lace. We don't like to purge that stuff or get rid of it. Okay, so I'm going to repeat the same thing on this second page. I'm going to do a little bit here on the spine first to make sure this piece attaches. I'm kind of overlapping a little because I want to make sure that I don't have any gap since I'm cutting two pieces. Kind of doing it on the feeling where the spine naturally lays and kind of doing it there. We're going to do this again, and then I'll show you what we're doing with the top. Just to give you guys a little info about my process, I don't really have a plan when I do these books. It's up to you if you want to have a plan. If you know exactly what you're wanting to do, if you want to lay your pages out ahead of time. I don't do that. My process is I'm a little more visual and I'm more inspired by all the pretties. So once I get out all my vintage stuff, which is my favorite thing to work with, it just kind of, I see things, I'm going through all my vintage totes and cubbies and finding all the yummies, and that's when I kind of design as I'm going, as I'm looking through things and think, oh, this would look good here. And so this is kind of my process. I'm showing you the way I do it, but if you prefer to do it more methodical, whatever works for you, I'm just sharing my process. And I've made, you know, quite a few of these, so it's just what works for me personally. Okay, I'm going to trim off the bottom piece. love making these books so much I could literally make one every day. Oh. Okay. Let's see. So we've got our little bit at the top, and I'm going to glue down the bottom really quick before I trim this edge. Okay, I want to show you so you can see the bottom. You don't need to leave excess on the sides here, so I am going to trim this as precisely as I can to the edge of the book. If you miss a little bit, you're a little too short, it's okay. But if you're a little too long, it's going to stick out, so you want to make sure you don't leave too much. There's another piece from my cluster bin. I don't know about you guys, but I love to sit at night when I'm watching TV with my husband, or you know, sometimes if I can't sleep at night, I've got a little shoebox, one of those shoebox totes, and it's full of cluster fodder, and I sit and make those. I just find it relaxing. I love to make those. Okay, now I'm going to snip off this excess down here because we overlapped with the other page and we want it to look neat. I'm going to give it another little, some spots that stick up with the glue gun. And you really can't tell. Lisa's very forgiving, so you really can't tell that's two pieces when you get it attached properly. Especially when it's all is said and done, because we're going to do some embellishment to the spine, so this is not going to show whatsoever. Alright, we're going to glue this spot. Don't you hate when you're almost finished and you have to get a new glue stick? That's so annoying. There's a tiny bit right here we missed. Getting off all the glue. Okay, I'm going to do a quick trim on the bottom where it hangs down a little bit too much. I don't think you guys are going to need to see me do this to the whole book, so I'm going to do a few pages to give you guys the idea, and then once you have your book all with your base layer down, then you'll be ready for step 3. And before we start step 3, I will come back and show you guys the progress that I've made on this book off camera to finish it, you know, my base layer. Okay, so now we're going to flip this over. This is our covers. So all I'm doing is, the reason I wanted you to keep this, because I don't like that unfinished edge, just personal preference. So what I do is I'm going to put a little snip right here. Turn it around so I'm not cutting blind. And I'm going to fold this down and glue it so it covers up that yucky raw edge. Completely your preference. You can choose to do this or choose not to. I just prefer it, so I'm going to do it. I've left many of them raw, and that's totally okay. There's no right or wrong, just whatever fits your aesthetic, whatever you like. And if you miss a tiny little spot like that, no worries, not a problem. So I'll just snip a little bit here where it doesn't jive. And then just cut off a little bit of the excess here. So when we go to decorate this page, we're going to start at the tippy top, so it's going to cover that and you won't even see it. Okay, we're just going to do the same thing with the back corner. Since we have two separate pieces here, I'm going to snip this one. And same thing. There's really nothing about this book that is hard. And one thing that I forgot to mention is you don't have to have a sewing machine to do this. If you want to hand stitch your pages together to make your book, that's totally fine. And you can hot glue the little ruffles on the edge. You can Fabri-Tac. You don't have to have a sewing machine to do this. I should have said that in the first video. So don't be intimidated if you heard sewing machine and you think you need one. It's really okay. Okay. The only other thing I like to do when I'm doing this step is I try to alternate. You know, I happen to have a lot of different big pieces of lace that I can choose from, so I like to make my book with a variety of different ones. So you saw the pile that I had in the beginning of the video. So since I did kind of an ivory on the outside, I'm probably going to do, I don't know, maybe the white. We'll see. And we might put the white on these pages with the pockets. So I just kind of, I hate to measure, you guys, so I just kind of do a guesstimate. I eyeball it. It's that lovely technical term of eyeballing. Again, I'm leaving a little bit on the top, and I'm leaving enough that I can go underneath, you know, inside the pocket, but I'm not going to waste my lace putting it all the way down into this pocket because it's not going to be seen. I'm going to have hankies in there, so, you know, since we hoard our lace, if it's not going to be seen, it's not going to get covered. If you want to do that, you can. I just don't like to. I want to make my goodies last, so I choose not to do that. Okay, so this piece that I trimmed off the bottom of this, we're going to keep this because this can easily fit across the bottom of another set of pages, and we can trim this net off so it'll have a scalloped edge and it will kind of be a little bit of a dangle like that and make it look really pretty when we're done. So if you know, cut something off and you know that it's going to look good somewhere else, just put it to the side like I'm going to do with this, because that's going to be when we get into step 3. Okay, so on these pages, I don't use separate pieces. If I have enough to go the width of the book, I don't use separate pieces. I'll glue right here down the middle. Just make sure, get my placing right. Be sure you're checking if you have your lace, you know, it's not inside out. With some laces, I know it's really hard to tell. These books that we're making, I find they make really, really good gifts. Especially if you know a bride to be. This is a really nice gift for a mother of the bride or something like that. It can have the pockets or not have the pockets. It just makes a really nice keepsake. They can keep all of their you know, they can keep their hanky that they used on their wedding day, their husband's corsage, you know, cards, things like that, special keepsakes. Okay, so you see this little piece, I didn't chop it off before I glued it, so we're just going to really carefully snip that. I tucked the bottom edge in underneath this pocket here. Make sure when you're doing that you don't glue the pocket to the lace. It's really nice if you're making one of these for a bride-to-be, if you have you know, pieces from an old wedding gown. I made one once that had along the spine on the outside, it had part of the buttons down the back of the wedding dress, and it was gorgeous. If you have old wedding dresses and you want to use lace or pieces of veil, it's perfect for this kind of project, and it just looks much more bridal and pretty. Okay, so on the bottom here, I'm just going to snip so it'll lay flat like that. Cut off this tiny piece. And this time I'm going to do it before we glue it. Cut off a little triangle piece there so it'll fit inside this pocket okay. I'm going to trim off the excess on this side. That's what happens when you eyeball it. Just be careful you don't cut the ruffle that's sewed to the page. That's why I kind of lift the lace up as I'm trimming. There we go. My thought is I'm going to use different embellishments on the pockets, so I'm not going to put the same white piece on the pockets. That's completely up to you if you like that and want to do that. Just kind of pull your pocket down, go all the way across, a little bit underneath, and just kind of push it in here. Hold it down and make sure you get it down really good with no bubbles or anything, and keep this pocket up for a minute so you don't end up gluing your pocket shut. Trim off this little piece. Glue around the other two sides. Every so often I have to rub my hands together to get all the glue gobs off of my hands from trying to get off the excess glue from my pages. So if you hear that noise, I apologize, that's what it is. Okay, a little trim on the side here. Again, don't cut your ruffle. Okay, so you're asking why I have it at the top here. I'm going to need it on this page, as you can see, but I'm not going to need it over here because it's our front cover. It was just easier for me to do that. So we're going to do a little snip at the spine. Then we're going to cut this piece off. Can you guess where it's going to go? That's right, in the cluster bin. It's hard to cut precisely with big scissors. Okay, just to get it out of the way, we're going to go ahead and flip this over, excuse me, and glue it down. Ooh, big glue blobs. This is probably the most monotonous, kind of boring step in the process. Like for me, I like sewing the book together and, you know, on the sewing machine, putting all the ruffles on, and I know that I'm getting it ready, and I know I'm going to make another book, and I get excited. This part is a little mundane, but it's really important that you have a good base, so it makes it easier to embellish. By the time we're done, there's not going to be barely, or if any, of this quilted batted muslin that you can see, but I really like it because the pages have enough heft that they can stand up to the embellishments. They're not too flimsy, especially when you're going to have them on front and back of this page. I've been doing this for a long time with these, and they just work really, really well. Okay, now I'm going to give you an idea for the pockets on this one. You can go ahead, if you have a little piece of this white lace left and you want to put it right here on the inside to cover that, you know, right here, you're more than welcome to. I have a little piece that we took off the top right here that's what I'm going to use it for. But first I'm going to cut this little white line off of it. Just keep in mind when you're doing this part too, you're going to be putting things on top of this. This process is layering big time. So you don't want to do too much. It's supposed to look kind of plain Jane while you're doing this, because you don't want to do too much, because it's going to be prettied up later. Okay, so little kind of adjustments like this are just kind of tricks that you learn when you've been doing it for a while. And to be honest, I've never made a book with pockets before. This is going to be my first one, because I've always made them for a customer or as a gift or for charity. So this is one that I'm going to do for me. I think it's going to be a cute way to display my vintage hanky collection too. Okay, so I want to pick a different type of lace. You guys can see I've got the ivory on the front cover here. Pardon all the glue blobs. We've got the white here, and I believe I'm going to be using some tie-dye, oh my goodness, tea-dyed embellishments throughout this book. So I want to use one that I think is really pretty and kind of goes along with that color, and that's this one. And you can see it's got the scalloped edge. It's almost like a double scallop, so it's going to look really pretty at the bottom here when the book is closed, because it'll be dangling. So you want to make sure you get a piece where you can use the bottom. Now these pockets are pretty small, so I'm not going to need a lot. So I know that I want it to hang down about this much. So we're going to cut a tiny bit above the pockets, because we're going to fold it over the pockets to make it look nice and pretty. Ooh, come on, scissors. Ooh, these scissors don't like this fabric. I just like a variety of colors in mine too, and I just think this is a pretty contrast between the two. Just going to snip it in half because we've got two pockets, if my scissors will let me. Okay. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to cut a piece that should be the size of the pocket right here, and you can see how pretty this is, where it dangles underneath, and it looks really pretty when you've got layers of those pieces hanging down when the book is finished. And then we're just going to do like this and fold it over so the raw edge of the pocket's covered, and I just think that looks nice. It's pretty contrast. So that's what we're doing with this. We need to glue gun. You'll see me use the Fabri-Tac a lot more when we get to the embellishment stage, because when you're gluing lots of your fancy pretties on there, especially if they're delicate and fragile, we're going to end up using the Fabri-Tac if they're as see-through as some of the laces are. Hope you guys are finding this fun. I appreciate you crafting along with me. If you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the comments. Let me know if you're crafting along with me, what kind of book you're making, what is it for. A lot of people ask what lap books are for, and they're just to pet and love and look at and enjoy. Or you could call this maybe kind of like a fabric journal. I've heard it called that too. Okay, I'm going to snip off my extra hair on the side. Carefully not cutting my ruffle. Just watch that scissor blade and make sure it doesn't go underneath the ruffle. You can see I have to snip a little bit here. Okay, we're going to just fold it under and put some glue. It's kind of hard to do, but you're going to put the glue along the top of the inside of the pocket here if you can. Just kind of hold that pocket away from the bottom. And then while you're holding this with one hand, I kind of just fold it down under and press. Okay, so there we go. You can cut off the excess. I'm going to do that off camera because it's kind of awkward to get in there with the scissors and do that. You can leave it if you choose. Wow, this stuff does not like these scissors. There we go. Okay, we're going to do that again on this side, and now you've got one of your pocket page layouts ready to be embellished. This is not rocket scientist, it's just a little time consuming, but just what I like to do when I'm doing this part too is I'm thinking about different things I have in my cord vault and my stash and what would be pretty in this. You'll see, and for step 3, things that you'll want to have. Other thing is, really quick, I'm going to make sure that I'm gluing this down at the same length, so when the book is closed you don't have one hanging down this much, and to make sure those match. So that's the first check I'm going to do, and I'm going to glue that down. Okay, so things that you want to have handy for part 3 once your book is completely has a base coat down is trims, laces, especially dangle or lace that will hang down off the bottom like this, doilies, appliques, bridal trim, bridal lace, bridal veil piece, anything like that. And then also I like to use things like pearls, vintage brooches if you have, seam binding, ribbon, anything that you want to put that you think will look pretty in here. You just want to have those ready for part 3. That's my favorite part, and I think that's the most fun. Okay. Although this part is kind of relaxing. You can also pull out things, you know, like your GIMP trims, fringe, because that will hang off the bottom of a page really nicely. Your tea dye yummies. I just did a couple of tea dye batches before this project, so I've got some to play with. And you can add other things too. You can add, if you wanted to use some chenille, like a vintage piece of chenille for a base on a page, you know, whatever floats your boat, whatever kind of stuff you like. So I'm going to snip the side here. snip this side, being careful. Okay, again, pull your pocket out. I spilled some glue there, so we're gonna have to be careful that we don't glue this pocket down. I'm gonna try and get it up with my thumb really quick. Ooh, ouch. Okay, press this down. Be careful, don't burn yourself. Use your finger protectors or your spatula. Okay, so I think you get the basic idea. I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of my pages off camera, and you can work on that too if you're crafting along with me. And like I said, just be careful when you're cutting. Don't cut your ruffles off. Make sure your dangles at the bottom match up, you know, in length, and make sure you're leaving enough here to fold over the top and glue down for the next page. And get out all your best goodies, your laces, trims, appliques, doilies, pearls, brooches, crystals, whatever you want to put to embellish it. Gather all that stuff and you'll be ready to keep going with me on our next step. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments section and I will answer them, and hope to see you again soon for part 3. Have a great day. Bye-bye.